Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of The Suited Shootist. This week I wanted to just kind of do a highlight reel of my biggest takeaways from my time up in Dallas at the RANGEMASTER Tactical Conference. I'm gonna do a class by class AAR like I normally did, but I figured this would be kind of a good place to start. I also, before I jumped in, just wanted to highlight, you may have seen a new promo code down the list the last couple of weeks. Casey over at ATR Targets has made that available to you guys, so it's not an affiliate code. I don't get anything off of it, but he just wanted to make that discount available to you folks. If you need steel targets or target stands, definitely hit him up. I have not had a chance to shoot them myself yet. However, my buddy Craig over at Templar Defense and Republic Mindset, he's one of the guys that I took the Green Ops class with. Casey was there as well. Has very good things to say about them, and so I am looking forward to kind of getting some time on them myself here in the not too distant future. So, like I said, if you're in need for steel targets, check them out and see if that fits your need. Anyways, like I said, I'm going to be doing an overall AAR class by class, but I felt like just kind of my highlighting the biggest takeaways that I got from this year's tactical conference would be worth touching on, especially given, like I talked about in the last video where we addressed this, the only rounds that I shot this year were the match. Every single class that I took was classroom or hands-on, and even still, I definitely got my money's worth out of it. Where I wound up spending most of my time was, and forgive me, I'm referring to my notes here because my memory ain't that good. 8 hours out of the 3-day weekend I spent in John Hearne's lecture. It was the 4-hour block on Friday morning and the 4-hour block on Saturday morning, and the focus was the the focus of that class was who wins, who loses, and why. What I really appreciated about John's lecture is, as you would expect from an 8-hour block of instruction, it went incredibly in depth from the very kind of brass tacks mechanical skill sets that people need, to mindset development, to making sure that physical fitness and everything balances in, what exercises can be done both physically and mentally to prepare people for the various different facets of all of this. And it was really kind of almost like a PhD level deep dive into the subject. And this infographic, I think, is probably one of the most useful takeaways for anybody, because, as you can see, it really highlights how many different arenas we need to have control over, especially given the ones that we don't have any influence with. So my biggest takeaways from John's lecture specifically were, number one, it truly highlighted the multidisciplinary aspect of it and was kind of a reality check, because like everybody else, I like focusing on the shooting. It's fun. I like focusing on the gun stuff. It's fun. This was shining a very bright critical light and kind of gave me the realization of, hey, you might need to kind of go back, reevaluate, and ensure that you're truly being well-rounded. The other nice little takeaway that I got from John's lecture was a bit of validation. There's a block in there of steps to take to help make sure that you, as the good guy civilian defender, don't accidentally get shot by responding police. I don't think I'm giving anything away here when I say he actually is of the opinion, if you're carrying a gun, you should not leave your house without at least wearing a collared shirt. Suffice to say, there's actually some studies that were done that he touches on in this lecture that prove out the kind of musing that I had earlier when I started the channel, that how you dress absolutely can help identify you or help contribute to the idea that you're one of the good guys. So that was kind of a nice little ego stroke in the midst of all of this soul-crushing reality. The other thing that I always make sure that I get at least a little bit of when I'm at Tac-Con is some of the hands-on refresher stuff with ShivWorks. So I spent some time with Larry Lindemann. One block of instruction was specifically on in-fight weapon access, and then the other one was on weapon retention, which are kind of two parts of the same puzzle, because the in-fight weapon access is very heavily emphasized on what Craig Douglas calls his rule of appropriate timing, making sure that certain conditions are met before you try and bring a firearm into the equation. Well, if you screw that timing up and it's now a gun grab, you want to make sure that you still have the ability to retain that firearm. Really, the biggest takeaway that I got from that was, for as much as I haven't been diligent about going as regularly as I should, the jiu-jitsu that I do have is still incredibly useful for that. I do feel a lot more comfortable in those grappling environments than I did before the introduction to that skill set. I'm not going to say that there were any dramatic takeaways from that for me, but it was definitely a good refresher. The one interesting point that I do want to mention is when Larry Lindemann specifically talks about his fence, he prefers not to go palms out. He is of the opinion that that is a bit more submissive, so the way he puts it is, he turns into an Italian and he just talks with his hands, so he's keeping everything up around the face and the jawline, but it's a lot more just sort of like what I'm doing now with gesticulating, as opposed to it being a barrier. Six of one, half a dozen of the other, maybe, but it was a noteworthy take that I thought was at least mentioning. I always also make it a point to take whatever block Massayub is teaching as well, because it's always going to be the kind of most current events of deadly force law. And he did go over some recent cases where there were some lessons learned, unfortunately, some examples of what not to do. It's just very useful, especially given that these days we are in a very rapidly evolving climate of different social temperatures, and how much public opinion is influencing a lot of these cases where it may not have been as large of an impact previously. So being able to keep a finger on the pulse of that and track that evolution is something that I always find incredibly useful. And of course, there's always going to be a couple of little refresher nuggets from his course material as well that it's good to keep top of mind. The other big one that I got a ton of mileage out of, as you would expect, the blocks of instruction that I got the most use out of were, not surprisingly, the longest ones. So I spent 8 hours with John Hearne, and spent 4 hours with Daryl Bulky. Daryl Bulky's block was specifically on the habits of successful gunfighters. Again, I don't want to go too much into the course material specifically, just because, again, as a respect to the material that he took the time and effort to put together. What I will say is this, couple of things. Number one is Daryl Bulky is absolutely exactly the grumpy bastard that he appears to be online. That being said, he is also far more approachable than he would lead you to believe. I think that some of that is a bit of a facade, just to kind of help him filter through some of the BS that exists within our culture. But if you come to him with a desire to learn and an intellectual curiosity, the man is amazingly generous with his time and his experience. I am going to be spending quite a bit more time with him, and a big focus of his is being able to process and actively think your way through a shooting problem. I don't know any details of it, but the thing that piqued my interest the most was he was talking about a shooting exercise that he runs in one of his classes that is effectively the El Prez. And a good time on this drill was 30 seconds, which, if you know the El Prez, you know that the standard turn 222, reload 222, a good time on that is, what, 10, 12-ish seconds? I think I shot it in 18 at the Green Ops thing with the penalties and all that. So, 30 seconds being a good time. I have no idea what the hell that entails, but I'm definitely interested. And the different arenas that he draws his experience from, the way that he articulates it and the way that he packages it to make it relevant is immensely useful. I think that for as much as I, for the number of friends that I have in the industry, and I don't mean to take anything away from any of them, we need more people kind of preaching this message that DB is, because I see I'm being exposed to how a lot of traditional firearms training has the potential to paint you into a corner if you're not intentional enough with it. That's not to say that anybody else out there is teaching bad content or that they are not framing it appropriately. But going back to the whole idea of just being holistic, Daryl definitely has a niche in that I think is a critical piece to the equation. So, aside from that, the other stuff was, the other one that I was really looking forward to was Greg Ellifritz, his presentation on safe travel in dangerous places, because if you followed his blog at all, this guy should have been killed in the streets like a dozen times just last year. He goes all sorts of places where he can't carry traditional defensive tools. He goes all sorts of places and drinks all sorts of things and eats all sorts of things that most average American tourists would shy away from. And it has led to this wealth of experience in terms of the proper way to do that, so that you can make as much worldly experience available to you as possible without looking like food and without being overly paranoid about things. So, I mean, if nothing else, a lot of what he touched on, as you would expect, is in his book. I have a copy that I bought. I was fortunate enough to get a signed copy, obviously. He signed it for me when we were there, but I bought myself a copy, and they are in the Amazon store link down below. If you do any kind of travel, it's definitely worthwhile, because even if you're not going to the sort of the hairy edge places that he does, even just sort of the standard tourists traps of the Caribbean, South America, Central America, and that kind of stuff. It's good practice just to kind of be on the lookout for the street hustles and all that kind of stuff. So those were kind of my biggest my biggest highlights of it. As mentioned before, I really do think that this is something that everybody should get in on whenever possible. It sounds like it is going to be in Dallas again next year, so once tickets go on sale, get them while they're hot, because again, it always sells out before the end of the year. I can't say enough good stuff about it. I'm going to do some breakdowns specifically of each respective class and kind of do my standard 3x3 AR that I took from the short-barreled Shepherd, but hopefully this is going to be sort of a highlight reel of some incentives, because I know people are still kind of cautious of, oh, well, you don't know what ammo is going to do, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't matter. You don't even have to bring a gun to this thing, and you'll still get a ton out of it. So, hope you found it useful. Hope everybody's staying safe. Hope everybody's staying sane. And aside from that, have a great week. Stay safe and stay sharp.